Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Skylar, and for those of you who don't already know me, I am the number 3 bearded bald guy from the engineering department. Now, as we enter this traditional time of festive holiday joy, it is with a heavy heart that I have the duty to appear before you to relate the sad and cautionary tale of how I lost big at fantasy football this year by ignoring lattice values. My tragic story starts a mere 14 weeks ago, back in September, when I, a younger and more naive man, thought to myself, what better way to get to know more of my coworkers at Lattice in these trying times of working remotely than to enlist in a friendly season of high stakes fantasy football coaching? Little attention did I pay at the outset to the fact that the Lattice Fantasy League draws heavily from the sales department. So friendly and supportive, yes, but also extremely competitive. Now, I don't have time to explain how fantasy football works, except to say that each week you select a starting lineup composed of real life players. You compete head to head against another coach in the league, and you win the matchup if your chosen players perform better in their respective real life games that week. At the end of the season, the coach with the most head to head wins earns a cash prize, and the coach with the worst record, well, more about that in a minute. Also, I don't have time today to address just how problematic American football really is on so many levels. Let's just put a pin in that rant and acknowledge that you can love something and still be troubled by it and still want to see its flaws corrected. Speaking of flaws, the first indication that my fantasy football team was going to fare even worse than the Broncos offense on third down came before the season even started. You see, to make my rookie fantasy draft a little bit easier, I decided that I didn't want to spend the year rooting for the rivals of my favorite teams, and that ruled out drafting players from about a third of the league. I also eliminated any prospects from the New England Patriots because every right-thinking person detests the New England Patriots. So instead of getting the best players from across the NFL, I overinvested in a few flashy rookies who often didn't play, but at least they were warming the bench for my favorite NFL clubs. Now, by putting my whimsical likes and dislikes ahead of the interests of my fantasy team, I failed at the value of shipmate self. And obviously, this strategy was going to survive about as long as poor Joe Burrow behind the Bengals O-line. Now, as my competitors began soundly trouncing me from one week to the next, I learned another thing that they already knew, which is that playing fantasy football involves no actual football. Coaches win by being extremely well-informed and staying well-informed, not just about their chosen players, but about the ones they might pick up in waivers or in trades. And this knowledge makes the difference between a merely good fantasy team and a season-winning champion, but it is not glorious at all. In fact, playing fantasy well involves a lot of staring at spreadsheets, or as you might know it better, chopping wood and carrying water. And I wasn't doing it. Another thing that I learned far too slowly was the importance of Wednesdays. Wednesday is the day that NFL teams rest, and that's when a coach has to figure out whom to start and whom to bench, because when opening kickoff happens on Thursday Night Football, your choices are locked in. On Wednesday, a wise fantasy coach asks, what's next? But instead, I was logging in on Sunday morning to discover too late that Miles Sanders was out for the week yet again with a bilateral Achilles hamstring. Now, sometimes you just get unlucky. There was the week that I lost to Paul Canty by 3 lousy tenths of a point, which I think wins some kind of record for the narrowest loss in fantasy football history. But at this point, my season had begun to nosedive like Daniel Jones on a quarterback scramble with literally no one closer than 5 yards. In desperation, I began making wild coaching decisions, like imagining in week 13 that the Dolphins would somehow keep Tua benched in favor of starting Fitzpatrick. What was I thinking? That's right, I was lacking clear eyes. The NFL regular season provides 256 unique opportunities each season for wishful thinking on the part of any fan or coach, and each one of these games is a fresh chance to lose a fantasy matchup or even the whole caboodle. The consequence for me of ignoring lattice values was that I had a worse football season than the LA Chargers special teams squad. According to IBM Watson's advanced football analytics, I squandered more draft capital than anyone else in the company fantasy league. I also came in dead last for the season. At least I still have a better record than the New York Jets. And that bet that I lost, the one that I mentioned earlier, was that I agreed to appear in front of all of you and own up to my mistakes. So I guess it's a good thing for me and for Lattice that I'm a better engineering manager than I am a football coach. But in summary, whether you're masterminding a fantasy football team or you're helping to build a future Fortune 500 company, please take a lesson from my example. Focus your attention on the needs of the team and not on your own likes and dislikes. Remember that following the path to glory demands a relentless focus on fundamentals. Plan for the game that you are actually playing, not the one that you wish you were in. And finally, always keep one eye on next week, because you never know what the season has in store. So thanks to my fellow fantasy coaches, without whom I could not have had such a disastrous season. And a shout out to my reviews and engagement pods, from whom I learn more about lattice values every single day. Happy Hanukkah, everybody.